There's a hadith related by Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, إذا دخل أحدكم المسجد فليركع ركعتين قبل أن يجلس. When one of you enters the masjid, he should perform two rakats of prayer prior to sitting down. This is a salat that is considered, that is called Tahiyyatul Masjid, which means greeting the masjid. Because the masjid holds such an important place in the life of a Muslim, whenever we enter the masjid out of respect for it, it's said that you should at least perform two rakats of prayer. The hukum of this prayer, it's mustahab, which means it's highly recommended, and it's not obligatory, but it is recommended, and there's great amount of reward, and a person obviously gets closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by performing these two rakats. There are some rules that relate to this prayer though. I mean, essentially it's just a two rakat nafil prayer, a voluntary prayer, an extra prayer, so it's not obligatory in any sense of the word. However, what it is that because the whole purpose of it is to greet the masjid, the whole purpose of it is to show that you're acknowledging that you've entered the masjid and you've got respect for this masjid, and thus you are performing these two rakats of prayer. In the Hanafi school at least, and maybe in the other schools as well, if you come in and the jama'ah has already begun, the congregation has already started, and you can't, that time it would actually be rude to start your own two rakats of Tahiyyatul Masjid, because there's something greater which is also part of the masjid that is taking place, which is the jama'ah, the congregation, the main purpose why you're there. So in that case, if you just join in the fard prayer that the imam has started, and you had an intention to do Tahiyyatul Masjid because you normally do Tahiyyatul Masjid, then you'll be rewarded for the Tahiyyatul Masjid as well, though your intention is primarily for that fard. But in the back of your mind you also have that you would have done Tahiyyatul Masjid had you reached there earlier. Likewise, if you got there and there's a short amount of time left and you don't have time for Tahiyyatul Masjid, then if you just do the sunnah of that prayer. So for example, you've gone in for Asr or for Dhuhr, and you've gone in there about 5 minutes earlier, you know that if you engage yourself in two rakats of separate Tahiyyatul Masjid prayer, it's going to then encroach on your time. You may not be able to then do your 4 rakats as in the Hanafi school of the Asr sunnah or the Dhuhr sunnah. Then you just do your sunnah prayer and you should be rewarded for the Tahiyyatul Masjid. Essentially, Tahiyyatul Masjid means you're greeting the masjid with any prayer whatsoever. So even if you're doing a fard prayer in that sense, or you're doing a sunnah prayer as a sunnah of the next fard prayer that you're about to attend, you'll get the reward for Tahiyyatul Masjid. But that intention must be there, that you're greeting the masjid as such. However, when you enter at any other time, and let's say it's a makruh time, when nafil prayers are considered undesirable or highly disliked, then you should do two rakats of prayer. The two times when you should not pray it, even if you do enter it the first time round, you're not going to do anything else, is after the Asr Salat has been performed, after your own Asr Salat has been performed. Once the Asr prayer has been performed, whatever time that is during the time of the Asr, once you've performed, you yourself has performed the Asr prayer, then after that you can't do Tahiyyatul Masjid until Maghrib. It's considered makruh tahrimi to do a nafil prayer. This is a nafil prayer, this is a nafil prayer as well. However, at that time, just as a separate point, you can do qada prayers. You can make up prayers at that time until about 15 minutes before Maghrib prayer, because that then becomes a makruh time. Likewise, Fajr time. Now the Fajr time is a bit different than Asr. In Asr, once it's only after you've prayed your Asr, your fard of Asr, that you can't then pray any nafil prayers. But before that time, during the time of the Asr prayer in general, you can make nafil prayers until you yourself have made your own fard prayer. Whereas in the Fajr, the whole time, regardless of whether you've performed your sunnah or your fard of the Fajr or not, there is no nafil prayer allowed in there. That's the difference between the Fajr and the Asr prayer times. So once, even if you've done your sunnah and your fard, or even if you haven't done them yet, you can't make any nafil prayer. It's makruh to do so during the time of Fajr. The nafil prayer time then is earlier, which is in Tahajjud time. Having said that, if there is a very big masjid, for example, let's just take the example of Masjid al-Nabawi. You're living in a hotel on the south side of Masjid al-Nabawi. You want to go somewhere, right, to the north side of it, right, or from the east to the west of it. Now, if you had to go all the way around, it's a really big trek. So what some people do is they go through the masjid. So essentially, they're using the masjid as a corridor or a shortcut. Likewise, this is the case in many big masajid around the world. I've experienced this in Delhi, in the big Jamia Masjid. There's all these markets and shops and businesses around it, and it's a very large complex. Very large complex. The courtyard, especially, is very large. So if you have to go through the masjid to get to the other side, then obviously that's considered a bit disrespectful that you're going through a masjid as a shortcut, because the masjid is actually for ibadah. So what the ulama say, that if you have to use it for that, you shouldn't, but if you really have to, because it's you just the other way around is very long, then you have to at least go in and make 2 rakats of prayer of Tahiyatul Masjid if it's the time for that, and then you carry on. Another point about this Tahiyatul Masjid, which I have specifically for people from the Indo-Pak subcontinent origin, is that they, and maybe some Hanafis to a certain degree, I'm not sure if it's a Hanafi thing or just a Indo-Pak subcontinent thing, but they don't consider this Tahiyatul Masjid to be, that they don't observe it as much. And they're, going to the masjid and will just sit down. If waiting for the prayer, they'll be engaged in sunnah or anything else, but there's not much regard for Tahiyatul Masjid on its own. So yes, it's not sunnah mu'akkada, right? It's not sunnah mu'akkada, it's not fard, it's not wajib, but it's something that should be done, especially when we do go to the masjid anyway. So 2 rakats of prayer. Another thing that you could do is that if you've got a lot of qada prayers to make up, then you go in there and you just do 2 rakats. Instead of the 2 rakats of Tahiyatul Masjid on its own, you could actually do a 2 rakat Fajr qada prayer, for example. If you've got Fajr qadas to make up, and you'd get the reward for Tahiyatul Masjid. So it's something to observe. The other thing about it is that it has to be performed before sitting down. If a person goes in and then sits down and then realizes, oh, I should do 2 rakats, I've got time, then they've lost that merit. They can still do the 2 rakats, but they've lost some of the merit of that, because it's the Prophet ﷺ said, قَبْلَ أَن يَجْلِسْ, before the person sits down. So this is before the person sits down. There is another prayer which is very similar to this, which is called Tahiyatul Wudu. That after the wudu is performed and before the body dries. Now this is probably more possible in hotter places than it is in colder places, because in colder places, once you've washed yourself, once you've made the wudu and the ablution, then you want to dry yourself as quickly as possible because it's quite cold. But in hotter places, people don't really dry themselves. They just make their wudu. By the time you get to the masjid, they're dry anyway. So normally the idea there is that once the wudu is performed, then you pray, you perform 2 rakats there as well for the wudu. Now, however, you could incorporate the two. You've done wudu, you've gone into the masjid, you make 2 rakats. Inshallah, you should be rewarded for both.